Greetings and welcome. We return back to 303 and the Conrad Unstoppable Volume Lesson 38 Second Hour class. Let's begin in our journals for just a moment with an observation, please, that our focus here is we owe respect to our country as citizens, an argument that will be made in this chapter. And secondly, we owe respect to each other as citizens in our country. Okay? Now, this is a sometimes controversial chapter because of some of the events that unfold. We'll go ahead and read it and let you kind of make your own observations about where you think this chapter is taking us in terms of our thinking. Let's go to work with it. One morning, again, page 129 of the volume. One morning, the kids in my son's second hour class rose and began to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. My son Colton, who was a sophomore, heard Armando say, "I pledge allegiance to Mexico." Armando sat down. Colton said to Armando, "Stand up and show some respect." Armando told Colton to shut up and called him a name that, let's just say, wasn't Mother Goose. Colton fired back by calling Armando a name that wasn't Richard Head. Both of them got sent to the dean's office. Now, are you ready for this? You better sit down. Colton and Armando were both charged with sexual harassment. Personally, I didn't care that they were both sent to the office, but sexual harassment? Come on, let's get real. That's another example of political correctness run amok, which is when I got involved. When I questioned the sexual harassment charge, I was told that Armando used the F word. Since both of them were responsible for disturbing the class, the teacher who sent them to the office said I couldn't charge one and not the other. I called the charges ludicrous and ridiculous. No way should a kid be charged with sexual harassment for having the courage to tell someone to show respect for the American flag, I demanded. Furthermore, as Colton's father, I can assure you we will not be pressing charges on Armando for dropping the F-bomb. I was livid. I demanded they drop the charges on Colton and Armando and the foolish political correctness. Needless to say, they dropped the charges. I also said I wish the teacher would have handled it in a different way. Well, what would you have done? They asked me. So I proceeded to tell them what I did. Armando was in my last hour class. I walked up to him 15 minutes after class started and said, "I understand you and Colton got into it today." Armando hung his head and shook it while shamefully saying, "Yeah." "Do you know why?" I asked. Armando said, "Because of the Pledge of Allegiance." "Yes," I said, "but do you know why?" Armando shook his head no. "Would you like to know?" I asked. Armando nodded yes. As we walked into the classroom away from the noise of the woodshop, I asked Armando if he had any brothers or sisters. "I got me 2 sisters, he said in broken English. I told Armando that was cool and that Colton had no brothers or sisters. He's an only child, or he was, until Chance Phelps moved into the apartment next door. Chance was a 7th grader. Chance was a 7th grader. Colton was a 2nd grader, and they adopted each other as brothers. Many times Colton and Chance tossed the football and baseball in the yard. Chance would invite Colton over to play Nintendo. When Chance's 7th grade buddies came over, he didn't ask Colton to leave because his real friends were there. He would always include Colton, his little brother. I said to Armando, "How cool is that? A 7th grader hanging out with a 2nd grader." "That's pretty cool," Armando remarked. I explained to Armando how Chance lived next door for 2 years. He took woodshop in high school and was a, quote, Brother Woods, unquote, a title earned by displaying a tradition of excellence in the woodshop. Chance had many friends because of his personality. When he was a junior, his mother moved to Palisade, and Chance graduated from Palisade High School. He was still a bulldog, but one of a different color. As Armando listened intently, I went on to explain how Chance got a, quote-unquote, job right out of high school. One day, his job, he volunteered to do something that not a lot of others in his profession like to do, man the .50 caliber machine gun in the turret of the lead Humvee in a convoy that was ambushed in Iraq. Knowing the kind of boy he was, I can only imagine the kind of Marine he became, I told Armando. Chance volunteered to be the machine gunner, knowing full well that that made him a target for the enemy. Well, Armando, the enemy shot that day and Chance reportedly returned fire, covering the convoy until he was fatally wounded. He came home in this box, I said, while turning the page of the Brother Woods scrapbook. I pointed to the coffin that Chance came home in. He was only 19 years old. An entire page of the scrapbook is dedicated to him. On that page are images ranging from high school football to the horse-drawn carriage that carried Chance to his grave. I asked Armando if he could see what was draped on top of the coffin. A teary-eyed Armando replied, "The American flag." "In that coffin is Colton's big brother," I quietly said to Armando. I then paused for a few moments before telling Armando how a couple of Marines would fold that flag and give it to Chance's mother, Gretchen. I watched as a single tear rolled down Armando's cheek. "I'm sorry, Mr. Conrad, I pledge tomorrow," Armando said while wiping his eyes. "No, Armando, I didn't tell you this story to force you to say the pledge. I shared it with you so you could understand where Colton is coming from." I patted Armando on the back while asking if he remembered the lesson, "Bundle up and stick together." Armando said, "Yes. When you sit down during the Pledge of Allegiance," I told Armando, "you break some of the sticks in the bundle. Because you have classmates who have brothers and sisters, and a few have their fathers," and we would add here, of course, their mothers over there fighting for our freedom from terrorists. They're fighting for the very freedom you benefit from living in this country. I concluded our conversation by informing Armando that the only reason he can sit down if he chooses to is because of the ultimate sacrifice people like Chance made. I simply asked Armando to remember that the next time he said the words, "I pledge allegiance." Some of life's best unstoppable lessons occur outside of the second-hour classroom. An interesting observation. Let's point out a few observations here as we finish with chapter 38. Notice, this is an important observation. I would put it in my notes. You're not born a patriot like the color of your eyes. I think this is significant. You choose to be a patriot, a lover of your country or not. And I've said this many times along with Mr. Conrad. If it is true that your generation lacks patriotism, as many of my generation like to point out, it is not your fault. It is the fault of my generation for not giving you enough reason to choose to be a patriot. Both Mr. Conrad and I deeply believe this. Of course, there's an interesting question here. We like to come back to this, making it personal, don't we? So let's ask this question. Are you living in such a way to help teach the next generation? See, because you are teaching the next generation in the same way my generation has taught your generation. Are you teaching the next generation to respect your country and all of her citizens, no matter any of those things that are usually listed, right? Race, creed, religion, sexual orientation. All of those things make our country what our country is. Are you living a life to show respect to all of those people? And in the process of showing respect to all citizens, showing respect to the ones who have fallen to protect that freedom, right? Of course, to live the life of a patriot, let's write it down. Obviously, there's two things. Not only do you have to have courage, but you have to have respect. And sometimes that's a very, very difficult thing to do, right? Very difficult thing to do. Of course, in a time now when there's huge debate about who stands or doesn't stand during a national anthem or a Pledge of Allegiance, who speaks, who does not speak, I think a chapter like this is germane. Of course, in the end, you have to make your own choice, kind of how you see these very thorny, sometimes difficult issues. Okay, chapter 38 of the Unstoppable volume. Thank you.